Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Science has already confirmed something astonishing. All of humanity descends from the same ancestors. Modern genetics leads us to mitochondrial Eve, the genetic mother of all humans, and to the Y chromosome Adam, the genetic father of all men. Regardless of cultural, racial, or geographical variations, there is one undeniable fact: we all come from the same root. But this discovery raises a fascinating question. What was the first language of humanity? If we all descend from a single original couple, what language did they speak? What language did the Creator himself teach Adam and Eve? Could it be that this sacred language still echoes, in some form, in our modern world? Or has it been completely erased, a secret buried in time, overshadowed by the divisions and mixtures of peoples? In this video, we will explore the primordial language of Eden, the original language of humanity, lost in the mists of history. So, before we dive into this mystery, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who also seek the hidden truth. Now, let's uncover the secrets of the lost language of paradise, the mysterious language of the angels, the first language of the world. There is an enigma that evolutionary science cannot solve: the origin of languages. Humanity is spread across countless language families. There are completely isolated languages, dialects that defy evolutionary logic, and peoples who, even after living side by side for centuries, speak radically different languages. How can we explain this vast and fragmented diversity? How did human communication become such a complex mosaic? Traditional science doesn't have satisfactory answers, but when we look at the biblical account, we find a surprising explanation. Man did not learn to speak. He was born speaking. According to sacred texts, Adam and Eve were created perfect, incorruptible, without sin. They were essentially immortal. And with this perfection came a unique gift: innate speech. Unlike what science proposes, humans did not need to develop language over thousands of years. They already possessed a complete language from the very beginning. But something happened. The fall of man changed everything. Sin brought corruption, death, and also the loss of original knowledge. The perfect language, granted by the Creator himself, began to fragment. As generations passed, the descendants of Adam and Eve had to learn to speak, as the gift of innate language began to dissolve. Many researchers have tried to find a primordial language, a mother tongue that connects all the peoples of the earth. But to this day, no one has been able to identify it. The answer may be hidden in the pages of the Bible. According to the book of Genesis, humanity spoke a single language, the mysterious Adamic language, the original language of Adam. But in the episode of the Tower of Babel, something extraordinary happened. God, seeing that men were challenging his authority, intervened and confused their languages. In one fell swoop, the Creator dismantled universal communication and scattered humanity into multiple languages, making it impossible to reconstruct that lost language. It was there, in the plain of Shinar, that humanity lost its connection to the original language. The perfect code, the language of Eden, was erased from the earth. Since the dawn of humanity, there was a time when all people spoke a single language, a primordial, universal language that united all of humanity. The book of Genesis, in chapter 11, verse 1, describes this unique period. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. Imagine a world where there were no linguistic barriers, where all emerging civilizations shared the same understanding, the same communication. This is what happened with the descendants of Noah, the lineages of Ham, Japheth, and Shem, all inheriting the same language, possibly the language of Adam. But something changed, something disturbing was about to happen. In verse 2, the text reveals that when the men migrated to the east, they found a vast plain in Shinar. And there, an idea was born, a bold project, a direct challenge to the Creator. Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they decided, come, let us build a city and a tower whose top will reach to the heavens. Here is the central point of the narrative. It was not just a tower, it was a symbol, a monument to glorify humanity itself, a collective effort to reach the heavens, to rival God himself. They wanted to be remembered, eternal, unshakable, and above all, they wanted to avoid being scattered across the earth. But there was a problem. The construction was advancing. Brick by brick, human ambition was rising. Then the Lord observed the work of mankind and made an alarming declaration. Behold, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this construction is just the beginning of what they will do. Soon, nothing will be impossible for them. What did this statement mean? What power was hidden in linguistic unity? Could humanity have unlimited potential if it remained united under one language? Something had to be done. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they may not understand one another. And so it happened. From one moment to the next, communication among them broke down. Where there was understanding before, now there was chaos. Words that once made sense became incomprehensible. Leaders could not command, workers could not follow orders. The great project, which promised to reach the heavens, was abandoned. Contrary to what many think, the tower did not collapse. It simply was never completed. Without a common language, humanity fragmented. Groups formed, tribes separated, and the dispersion across the earth became inevitable. That place was named Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the people. And from this event, the multiplicity of languages we know today was born. From the moment the confusion of languages occurred in Babel, humanity followed a new course. The words once shared transformed, multiplied, and evolved into different dialects, language families, and over time isolated languages with no recognized relationship. But what really happened to the primordial language? The text of Genesis 11 is clear. The original language of humanity was taken away. All the languages that exist today, no matter how ancient, were born from this event of dispersion, imposed by God to fragment the unity of the peoples. None of them, no matter how close they may seem, can be considered the true language of Adam. And yet, some believe that certain languages could be remnants of this lost tongue. Now we will dive into the theories about this search, the attempts to decipher what, according to the biblical account itself, was erased from human memory. Hebrew, the true language of Adam and Eve. Many believe that the primordial language of humanity, the one spoken by Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, was ancient Hebrew. This idea has been widely spread, and many scholars and religious people argue that Hebrew was the original language, the same one used by God himself in the creation of the world. Some say that, although deteriorated over time, Hebrew still preserves its essence as the sacred language of the first human beings. However, this view often overlooks historical and linguistic facts that may tell a very different story. What few people mention is that Hebrew is a Semitic language, part of a linguistic group that includes various languages from the Middle East and North Africa. Furthermore, in ancient times, Hebrew was not even called Hebrew. It was merely a dialect of the Canaanite Phoenician language, adopted by the Israelites when they settled in the land of Canaan and mixed with the local culture. The book, Ancient Canaanites. The civilization of Canaan before the Israelites provides categorical evidence that the Israelites, upon leaving Egypt, did not speak Hebrew. This makes sense, as their origins trace back to Mesopotamia, not directly to the land of Canaan. If this is the case, how could Hebrew be the primordial language? If the Hebrews themselves adopted a local dialect upon arriving in Canaan, this suggests that their original language was different. Despite the lack of biblical support, many still consider Hebrew a holy language, superior to all others. However, from a linguistic standpoint, it is just another language within the vast diversity of humanity. This linguistic idolatry often leads to the belittling of other languages, such as Greek, Latin, or even English. There are even those who claim that God only hears prayers made in Hebrew, which, let's face it, is a great absurdity. Hebrew undoubtedly holds immense historical and religious importance, especially in the Holy Scriptures. but claiming it to be the original language of humanity ignores biblical and historical evidence. Aramaic, the language of Jesus. Could it be the language of Eden? After analyzing Hebrew as a possible primordial language, we come to the second candidate, ancient Aramaic. This language gained fame for being widely spoken in the time of Jesus Christ, to the point where many refer to it as the language of the Lord. Indeed, Jesus spoke Aramaic, as did many of the biblical patriarchs. Abraham, for example, coming from Mesopotamia, was likely familiar with this language. Jacob, his grandson, is called the Aramean in Deuteronomy 26, which suggests a direct connection between the Hebrews and the Aramean speakers. But does this mean that Aramaic was the original language of humanity? Again, the answer is no. Aramaic was not the language of Adam and Eve, but rather the language of the descendants of Aram, known as the Arameans. These peoples, belonging to the Semitic group, developed the Aramaic language and its various dialects over time. Like Hebrew, Aramaic shares similarities with many other Semitic languages, including Akkadian, Arabic, and Hebrew itself. This similarity often leads some people to theorize that the primordial language might have been a fusion of Hebrew and Aramaic, but this idea is mere speculation without any solid foundation. Some groups believe that the mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic could reveal the language spoken by Adam and Eve. However, this hypothesis lacks historical or biblical support. Both languages, though extremely significant within the Jewish-Christian tradition, are simply linguistic variations developed over time. They belong to well-defined language families and emerged long after the period that would theoretically be the creation of humankind. Therefore, just like Hebrew, Aramaic cannot be considered the original language of humanity. Having analyzed Hebrew and Aramaic as possible primordial languages, we now turn to other theories that point to even older languages: Sumerian, Akkadian, and ancient Egyptian. Could any of these languages have been the ones spoken by Adam and Eve in Eden? Sumerian, the oldest of languages. Among the candidates, Sumerian stands out for its ancient roots. It is considered one of the oldest written languages in the world, belonging to the Sumerian civilization in Mesopotamia. Because of this, some scholars suggest that Sumerian may have been the original language of humanity. Although this theory may seem plausible, it encounters a fundamental problem. Sumerian is a language isolate, meaning it has no known linguistic relatives. Furthermore, if we go back to the biblical account of Genesis 11, we find the story of the Tower of Babel, where God confused the languages of mankind. If this happened, it means that the primordial language was lost, and any language that emerged afterward became part of the linguistic diversity created by God. Thus, Sumerian also cannot be considered the language of Adam and Eve. Akkadian, a link between Semitic languages? Another language that frequently appears in this discussion is Akkadian, one of the oldest Semitic languages spoken by the ancient Akkadians in Mesopotamia. Many confuse Akkadian with Sumerian, but in reality, they have no linguistic relation. Sumerian, as mentioned, is an isolated language, while Akkadian belongs to the Eastern Semitic family and is the predecessor of languages like Babylonian and Assyrian. Despite its historical importance, Akkadian cannot be the language of Eden either, as it is part of the group of languages that emerged after the linguistic dispersion of the Tower of Babel. Ancient Egyptian, the lost language of paradise? Another curious theory suggests that the true language of Adam and Eve was ancient Egyptian. Some argue that the complexity and antiquity of this language make it a strong candidate for the primordial language. However, like the other languages mentioned, this idea is speculative. Ancient Egyptian, despite being extremely old and influential, is just another language that emerged within the context of ancient civilizations. So far, we have analyzed various theories and concluded that none of the known languages can be considered the primordial language. If we accept the account of Genesis 11, then the original language was removed from humanity by God, making its recovery impossible. This means that any theory about what language Adam and Eve spoke will always be speculative. What we know for certain is that all the languages that came afterward are the result of the dispersion at the Tower of Babel. What we know about the original language of Adam and Eve is, in fact, very little. Biblical texts mention this language briefly, merely referring to it as the language of Adam. However, we do not even know its name. It is believed that this language could be called the language of the angels, as mentioned by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. Some suggest that, most likely, the language of the angels would be the same as Adam's language, the celestial language given to humans but taken away due to sin. What do you think about this? Do you believe that any of the languages mentioned could have been the original language spoken by Adam and Eve, the primordial language? Share your opinion in the comments. May God bless you, and see you soon.